Andy Plemons is the school library media specialist at David C. Barrow Elementary School in Athens, Georgia, and a Google certified teacher. His library program is grounded in transliteracy, participatory culture, and students as creators of content shared with a global community. Andy's students are often seen Skyping with authors, including Skyping with some librarians right here in Vermont, Skyping with some guest speakers, and with developers of the tools that they use in the classroom. So authentic learning, where they're Skyping with people who have created the tools that the students are using. He also collaborates with libraries around the world, and as I said, including Vermont. Some of his honors include the Georgia Exemplary Elementary Library Media Program, being a finalist for the School Library Journal School Librarian of the Year, and the 2015 National School Board Association 20 to Watch. You can follow Andy's work on Twitter at PlemonsA, or on his blog, which is barrowmediacenter.com. And that was also nominated for a 2014 EduBlog Award. So welcome, Andy, and everyone, please give him a hand. I hope I didn't give you away.
No, you're fine. Thank you. So today I'm going to be sharing something with you that's very important to me, and that is student voice. Empowering student voice in the library and in our school. There's a lot of talk, I feel like, right now about student voice and what that means. So I invite us all to think about that together today. What does it really mean to empower student voices? There was a recent TED Talk by Kate Simons, and in it, it was called I Am 17, and she talked about how as a 17-year-old, people probably assumed her stepping out and doing a TED Talk that she had some incredible organization she had created, or a website she had developed, or something of great value to contribute. But what she challenged people to do was to realize that as a 17-year-old, she had a voice, and many times that voice was not listened to. It was dismissed simply because of her age. And so she challenged everybody in that TED Talk to really think about how do we listen to and value every person's opinion, no matter what the age of the student. George Couros kind of extended that idea from that TED Talk and really talked about that this is not just listening to kids. We can listen to someone, hear their idea, and then kind of move on. This empowering student voice is more about listening to what kids have to say and then bringing them into the change process within your school, within your community, within the world. And Rusul Arabel says that as we are empowering voice, we need to be careful that we are not empowering one voice over another. We're not just giving gifted students an opportunity or white students, but that we're looking at all students in our school and how we're empowering voices at every level, no matter the age, no matter the student. So what does it look like? How do we do this? How do we engage the members of our school beyond our walls? That's what I want us to think about today. And I want to say right up front that every single one of us faces barriers. And oftentimes those barriers become this thing that sort of stand in our way. And for some people, those barriers become such a big wall that they just give up. But I invite you to think about your barriers, and instead of dismissing a great idea that you have, think about how you can build a bridge beyond that barrier. So your barrier may be that you don't have any technology. Maybe your barrier is that time or scheduling or money. There are lots of barriers out there, but there's usually a bridge to build. Really all it takes, even if you don't have a class of one-to-one computers, really all it takes is one device to connect your school, your classroom with the global community. And for most of us, we carry that in our pocket. If you have this in your pocket, it doesn't matter if you don't have a computer in your classroom, you still can connect your kids with a global society. Now, I'm fortunate to have a lot of computers, but they don't always work. Recently, I was doing World Read Aloud, and I had like 8 Skypes scheduled a day for that whole week. And the very first day, nothing worked. The internet just crashed, and I had Skypes with authors, and it was a big deal. And so I pulled out my phone, and we all huddled around my phone and Skyped with Liz Scanlon, and she was great, and the kids were great. But it doesn't have to be this big fancy setup. If you have something as simple as a phone in your pocket, you can connect your students. To me, it's really important to put my work out online for people to look at and learn from, but also to get my student work out to an audience. Austin Kleon, in his book, Show Your Work, says that if your work isn't online, it doesn't exist. And that seems really extreme, but it's really true, because if you're doing all of your amazing work within the walls of your school, but that's where it stays, then people assume things about you. They start to form their own opinions about what's going on in your school and what they think you're doing behind those walls. But if you're very public about your work and you put it out there through blogs and social media and websites, you are defining for the world what education looks like within your school. So people often ask, how do you find the time to blog? And I usually flip that around and say, how do I not find the time to blog? Because for me, it is the main way that I get my students' voice out into the world and educate people on what goes on in my library. I love that online everybody can contribute something. It doesn't matter if you're a doctoral student or someone that's been teaching for 30 years, or you've developed your own web software, or if you're just a 8-year-old in 3rd grade. Everybody can contribute something online. It's a great equalizing space. So for me, I have, for my library, a Facebook page where I share things. I'm very active on Twitter. Another thing Austin Kleon says is that you should show something every day. So I'm constantly walking around with my phone in my pocket, pulling it out, snapping pictures, tweeting little moments of the day and showing just little snippets. And then those many times come into those blog posts that come later, where I really reflect on what we've done and share with other people what's happening in our library, but also include student work. I feel like every time that I make my work public, it leads to some other connection. It leads to some connection for an individual student, a group of students, a whole grade, the whole school. I just never know what's going to happen when I post something online. Sometimes nothing, but most of the time something happens. So I just encourage you, as you're thinking about your own classroom or school or a library or whatever your role is, think about how you can make your work public. I'm also not afraid to take risk. A lot of times when I do things with a teacher, it's something I've never done before. It's a tool I've never used, and the teachers have come to know that's what I'm going to do with them, and everybody's kind of at a different comfort level. Some people really like to know what's going to happen at the end, and oftentimes I don't know what's going to happen at the end. So I invite people to take risk with me in the library and know that as we do something and we may reach for something that's just a little bit beyond, but still some incredible things are going to happen along the way. So today I want to share with you some different ways that I empower student voice. This is not the way to empower student voice, it's just some ways that I do it. So I'm offering it to you to reflect on and think about your own role, your own class, your own school, your own district, and think about how it relates to what you do. So one of the things that I talk a lot about, a lot of people ask me about this project, is my student book budgets. And for many libraries have a wish list where they let kids make a list of books that they would love to be able to purchase, and then the librarian takes those and considers them, and that's a great way to honor students. But to me, that's not empowering voice. Empowering voice is taking that budget and handing it to the kids and saying, here's your money, spend it. And so we've come up with a process that we go through, and this all started because I started noticing students who were coming into the library. They were wandering around, and no matter how much I talked to them, they would leave with nothing. They just were not finding anything that connected with them. And so I decided that year to take those students and give them money to buy books for the library that they would read. And when I did that, it was an amazing experience to see how engaged these students were, how seriously they took this task of spending this money, and how they really found something that they would read. And they all read all of the books that they purchased. And since then, I've done this every year, and I've done it in many different ways. Some years I let teachers choose the kids. Some years I just do an all-call. That's what I did this year. I just sent out a Google form to everybody in 4th and 5th grade and said, do you want to be in the book budget group? And they signed up. They gave a reason why, and I took pretty much every student that wanted to do it. So we had about 40 kids this year. They developed a Google survey about reading interest, and we emailed it to students. They also went out into the school with iPads and surveyed kids about their reading interest. And of course, all that information was coming back to a Google spreadsheet that we could look at later to analyze. We even went to lunch and caught kids while they were in their seats, and so we weren't interrupting instruction time. That's my daughter with the banana. We have an informal way of gathering data too. We have this big glass board in the library that people can write on. So I just put a question on there for maybe people that the survey didn't speak to them. They had an alternative way to give us some information about things that they wanted to read. We brought all that data back to the library and analyzed it to see what were the top things that people were asking for in the library, and we set goals. I sent those goals to vendors, and I said, these are the kinds of books that our kids are wanting in the library. Can you come and meet with them? Not meet with me. Can you come meet with the kids and show them some books that match these goals? So Jim Boone from Capstone Press came in. We also this year worked with an independent bookstore, and they all came in with very targeted kinds of resources for kids to look at. The kids they loved looking at the books. But they made lots of wish lists, some on paper, which was very messy, as you can see, and then some we scanned straight into a list on the vendor website. And then came that really hard decision. How do you take $5,000 worth of books that you have put on a wish list and narrow it down to $1,500? And so they had really tough decisions. And along the way, we, of course, documented what we did and shared it on the blog and Twitter. Also, Capstone, I did a little video for Capstone, and they shared it with a lot of their reps around the country. And so people were contacting us and asking what we were doing and replicating the same project in their schools. So we actually were able to Skype with some of the schools. This is a school in Texas that we Skyped with, and my kids talked to their kids about the process, and we exchanged some ideas about how to make it work better. So once they get the list ready, I do the sending off of the list, and then the kids think about marketing. How are we going to sell the books to the rest of the school? So they make displays on windows, and you'll see a few different libraries in these pictures because we've moved spaces over the past few years. They made signs, they made videos like Animoto commercials and then the great thing is when the books come in. They unpack them, they check off the packing slip, they make these big displays of books, and then the great thing is seeing all the kids come in and start checking out the books, because the books, usually by the time we put them out, they're gone by the end of the day. So to me, it's more than just kids coming to the library and feeling like they're consuming the things that I offer them. I want kids to come into our library and feel like they really are a member of the library, that they have a voice, that they're valued, that they are able to make decisions, that I'm not the gatekeeper that does everything, that controls everything in the space. It's our library, not mine. So also within the school, we've done some projects like Genius Hour type projects. We did something called Genius Con with Sherry Gick and Matthew Winter. And this project really empowered students to think about an authentic problem in their school. So the question was, if there was one thing in your school that you would change, what would it be? And so kids could come up with anything they wanted to. And they researched that topic. They came up with presentations and various ways of convincing people to help solve the problem that they came up with. So they came up with things like, extending recess, or some kids were really passionate about lunch and wanted to make some changes to what was served in the cafeteria, and having more local food instead of processed things. It was really interesting what kids came up with. And so they all did their research. We kicked it off by Skyping with Peter Reynolds, and he talked to the kids about being creative. And and all that came about because I sent a message to Peter and said, this is the project that my kids are doing. I think that your books and your kind of mission with Fable Vision is right in alignment with what we're doing. I think it would be perfect to kick it off. Do you have 10 minutes you could connect with us? And they absolutely said yes, and Skyped with us from a Starbucks in Florida. But he really talked to the kids right at the beginning about making a difference and exploring their own interest, and it was kind of the perfect kickoff. And then we partnered with the University of Georgia, which is right next to our school, and the College of Education, and every kid doing the project, these were second graders, every kid doing the project had a UGA student that worked with them. And when we originally did it, we thought that the UGA student would sort of have all this information and be these expert people who would teach the kids about finding the answers to their questions. But what I quickly learned was that the second graders had as much to share with the college students as the college students had to share with the second graders. And their teacher, the college teacher, realized that too. And she said, this is really amazing that what my students are learning from your second graders about using technology and all of these Google tools that they didn't know anything about at the college level, which was just really interesting to me. So that sort of partnership has blossomed into some other things I'll share in a little bit. But what we did with our GeniusCon projects after that was the kids presented them to the authentic audiences and tried to create change in their school. And they knew going into it that not every student was going to actually cause change to happen, because there couldn't be 60 things change in 1 year. But they knew that they would be heard and considered. And things, even this year, have continued to happen because of things that those students raised last year. Like this year, we got all new playground equipment for our playground, and it started with those kids. So we did connect with some other schools that were doing the same thing, middle schools and elementary schools, and we shared the work with them. I love using kids as teachers in the school, and so I use students as grade level leaders instead of me standing up and talking about how to use Animoto or how to use Google Forms or how to use, just insert any tool there. I get students to do it. When we do a big project, sometimes we'll host a little fair and kids will rotate around and experience a lot of different tools at one time and then decide the one that matches their project the best, and they're taught by the other kids in their grade. I also use students to teach other grade levels. So this is a third grader and there's a fifth grader down in the bottom corner. These are kindergartners that are doing 3D modeling in Blockify. And so these students were experts in those tools, and so they came and co-taught with me so that kids would have more support exploring these tools. And I've done that for lots of different things where we bring kids in. Also just giving them opportunities to work together. It has nothing to do with me. Like this is a student who was teaching another student about robotics. He has way more expertise than I do. And together they've developed a great friendship just around robotics. And before that, they were just in different grades and knew each other, but now they're really good friends because of this partnership. We also let kids teach other schools. So this is a kindergarten class, and they used a program called Tux Paint. And they were drawing different things for informational text that they were writing. And when they finished, they thought, well, other people would like to probably use Tux Paint and might be wondering about it. So they used Screencast-O-Matic and made a screencast of them demonstrating how to use Tux Paint. And we uploaded it to YouTube, and then I shared it. And then my friend Shannon Miller, who was a teacher librarian in Van Meter, Iowa, was doing a project with her first graders. And she said, well, this would be perfect for my first graders to watch. So they watched it. Then our kindergartners did a Skype with her first graders, and her first graders asked my kindergartners questions. And so we were just kind of the facilitators of that. And you can see, the kids really felt like they were big and famous just from that one, what would seem to us like a simple thing. It really was a big deal to them. I really feel strongly that there's no way I can be an expert in every tool that's out there. There's just too much. And I think I agree so much with this from Invent to Learn that we can't wait until we're the expert in a tool to use it. We've got to be willing to jump in, try it, and trust that our students can figure some of these things out. They can figure all of them out, really. And it really frees us up to focus more on the content, not on how to use all of these tools. Allowing the kids to do that piece in particular is empowering for them and also freeing for us as educators. So another way that I empower voice is through crowdsourcing content. So often we do these really big projects where every kid in a grade level is creating some project. And so that project may just live on an internet link, and that's it. There's no, unless you start sharing it out somehow, it never really reaches an audience. So what I've started doing recently is pulling everybody's work together in a central place so that it's easy to share that work out with other people. We use ThingLink a lot to do that. So these are second graders who wrote monster stories, and in art they made their own monster to go along with the story. And they each made a video puppet show that was uploaded to YouTube. But instead of having 20 different YouTube links, we just put them all in one picture and then linked each one on ThingLink so that we could share that one link and get all of their work out to an audience with one swoop. This is a map of Georgia that's on the floor in our hallway, and so every kid in a group did a tour of a region of Georgia. And so again, we took all those regions of Georgia, attached it to that picture, and then we put a QR code out in the hall so people walking down the hall could scan that QR code and take a tour of Georgia. Same idea with rocks. I also use Google Forms a lot for crowdsourcing, where I'll want to do a blog post and I'll send out a question to kids and say, will you fill this out and help me write a post? And so I'll take quotes from all of them to construct some type of post. I also used it to write poetry. So we were doing Poem in Your Pocket Day, and I had gotten so tired of people coming in and saying, the library is a quiet place. Because it's not. Our library is not a quiet place. There are quiet moments, quiet spaces, but the whole place is not quiet. So we wrote a poem called Our Library is Not a Quiet Place. And so I made all of these different stems of questions, and kids submitted their lines for the poem. And I probably had, 100 or so lines that were submitted. And so I made sure that I included every student who chose to do it. I made sure I included one of their lines in the poem. And then at our Poem in Your Pocket Day, that's the poem I carried in my pocket. And I read to every class so that students could hear their lines read aloud. Also use Google Hangouts for crowdsourcing. And this came about because there was a team of teachers who all wanted the same lesson for me in the library. And sometimes that schedule gets really tricky, and not everybody could sign up for the lesson, but everybody wanted to do it. So I said, well, let's try something different. Let's try doing a Google Hangout instead. I said, you all stay in your classroom, and I will teach you from the library in my office. And so we did this list poem called Under My Bed, Things You'll Find Under My Bed. I read a mentor poem to them in the Hangout, and then I did a shared Google Doc with all of them. We did it through Google Hangouts on Air, so it was all archived as we were doing it to YouTube. And so after I did the mentor poem, I turned the mics off, and in their classes, they all started contributing to the poem. So all 4 classes were writing at the same time. While they were doing that, I tweeted the link to the doc out on Twitter so that people could watch the poem be constructed in real time. So the kids immediately were published authors. They immediately had an audience that was reading their work, watching it be constructed, giving them comments on Twitter about what they were writing. And then when the final thing was made, we read it in the Hangout, and then, of course, did a blog post to share it later. We do this really big project in 4th grade called the Wax Museum. And kids research a person from history. They dress up as that person. They stand in the hallway. They say their little speech over and over and over and over. And it's great fun. But it's not for every kid. Every kid doing a speech in front of 100 people walking up and down the hall is not the best situation for every student. And so I offered the teachers this idea of a different way of giving students a voice in this project. And so we decided to do an augmented reality wax museum. So there was still an option to dress as your character and do that more traditional thing. But many kids chose to do a digital project instead. And what we did was in art, they created a trigger image representing their person that they researched, and that was hanging out in the hallway. And then through Layer, we linked whatever their digital project was to that image, and when parents came in and whoever came in to view it, they got an iPad out of the cart, walked down the hall and scan, and so then they were able to walk with their child. Instead of listening to their child one time and then having to walk away, they were able to spend that whole hour with their child, walking up and down the hall, learning about some new technology most of them had never seen. And these kids were able to do something that was more connected to their talents. So that was all school. I also do a lot of empowering voice within the community. So every year our 5th graders do a project where they give a gift to the school. And many times that project is chosen by the teachers at the last minute. They're like, oh my gosh, Big Bad, I have a gift to the school. And so they buy something, and then some child steps up and presents it at the moving on ceremony. So one year I decided, let's see if we can do something different so that it is more student involved and gives more kids a part, so they really feel like they've contributed something when they leave 5th grade. And so we came up with a little free library. And we started at the very beginning of the year, and we worked with the classroom teachers, the art teacher, and then me in the library. The kids were in teams. Each student in the team had a role. They researched little free libraries. They looked at how to build them, how to fund it. When we started, that was really the only thing that we had was we're going to do a little free library. We didn't know where we were going to get the money. We didn't know anything. We just trusted that we would figure it out along the way. So I started blogging about it, and out of the blue one day, I got a call from Rick Brooks, who is the co-founder of Little Free Libraries. And he said, I saw your blog post. I saw the video that you made introducing the project to the students, and I want to be involved in the project. And so I said, all right, great. And so he Skyped with us and really gave the kids a lot of pointers about what to do for the project. So some students wrote persuasive letters to places like Home Depot. Also, we knew we were going to put one at our school, but we wanted to build a second one that was somewhere in the community. So kids picked an area of high poverty in our community. They wrote some persuasive letters to a community center that was there asking if we could put one there. And everything started to come together because of this student voice that was being sent out. Home Depot contacted me, said we will pay for everything. We'll donate all the materials, we'll build them, we'll deliver them to your school, we'll give you all the paint to paint it, we'll even help you install them if you need us to. The community center said, how could we say no? And so the kids started, they all came up with designs, they voted, they chose the designs, they painted them, and now both of those little free libraries are out in the community and very used. We're constantly having to put new books in both of them. I also love working with our local independent bookstore. One, because they come in and do things with us, but they also bring us incredible opportunities for kids to meet authors and talk with them. But they come in and teach things like how to write shelf talkers, like they write on the shelves in the bookstore. So kids are seeing a real-world part of someone's job and how it relates to them in school. So they do these mini lessons, and then kids write those, and they get put on the library shelves. When we were doing the book budgets, they brought in books as a vendor and book talked several books that they had in the shop that matched our goals. We also were doing a composting environmental project, and we brought in a local organization called Seed and Plate. And they taught the kids about gardening and composting and worked with them on creating their digital products that they made. And then they ended up putting the kids' work on their website, which was really cool. That it wasn't just me putting their work out, but they were putting it out as well. You heard in the introduction that I really love connecting with experts. And so one year we were doing some action research where we were in a temporary space, and these windows, you can see this picture, were pretty much mirrors, and the birds were just crash landing into the windows constantly. So the kids were very upset by that, and so a third grade teacher decided we're going to turn that into a project. And so she completely handed it over to the kids and said, how can we solve this problem? So we reached out to Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and they connected us with a person who was an expert. But we also had a middle school student who wants to be an ornithologist when she grows up. And so she knows a lot about birds, even as a middle school student. And so we Skyped with both of them, and it was really fun to see, a person with a doctorate and a middle school student, and they were both sharing their expertise about birds and their ideas for how to solve this real problem that the kids were facing. We also share a lot with authors, and it's not just connecting with authors and having them talk to us like they're the sole expert. Many times when we connect with an author, the kids have something to share. So this is Jenny Sue Kostecki-Shaw, and she's the author of Same, Same, But Different, and her most recent book is called Luna and Me. The kids did their own artwork of their world, which is a connection with same, but different. And so when we Skyped with her, she got right up in the camera, and the kids were showing her their artwork. And she did this beautiful critique of their work. I mean, you could tell that she wanted to give them every ounce of feedback that she could give them. And I just thought, how amazing is that for each of these kids? To hear from a person who illustrates for her job, giving them feedback on their work as if they're on the same level that she's on. Skype in the classroom is a lot of people think, well, how do I connect with all of these different people? Skype in the classroom is a great place to start that. If you're afraid of how big Twitter can be, there's lots of connections you can make on Twitter, but sometimes that's for you that might be too big to just send something out into the Twitter sphere or whatever and say, I need somebody to connect with. In Skype in the classroom, there's people who have already stepped up and said, I want to connect, so it's really easy to find someone. When we were doing a project with Force and Motion and creating our own Rube Goldberg inventions, we connected with Rube Goldberg's granddaughter, and she was able to show us original artwork from Rube Goldberg and talk to the kids about the Rube Goldberg challenge that she does along with other people, and encouraged the kids as they were starting their own. When kids were doing a graphic novel project, rather than me pretending to be an expert in graphic novels, I contacted Capstone and said, do you have anybody in your graphic novel department that could talk to the kids really quickly about what the process is, how you walk through, and they connected right with us, took the kids from step one to the end of creating a graphic novel, and then the kids started their own project. So a lot of things that I've said so far has been about whole grades, whole classes. But I think there's, with the technology that we have in our rooms now, there's so many opportunities for individualized instruction now more than ever. And so kids really can have these individual mentors that they reach out to through you to connect with the tools that we need. In the past, we would have to find somebody whose schedule worked out to come all the way to our school and take time out of their workday. But with the technology now, all we have to do is find 10 minutes in somebody's day that they can Skype with us from their desk or do a Google Hangout. This is a student who was doing a project on energy, and he did a Google Hangout with a guy who was in Atlanta, so it wasn't that far away. But the guy was at work, and he was able to do all of his interview questions, get all this great research, and make this connection with a real-world job. Another thing that we do is connecting with developers. I love that there are so many new tools coming out, but every time a new tool comes out, these companies that create these tools are hungry for feedback. Most of them want their tool to work. They want to be successful. And so our students use these tools. We see their frustrations and their success in our classrooms, but I feel like a lot of times we maybe fuss about it or gripe about it or celebrate it within the walls of our school. But if you start having conversations with these people, it really leads to some great relationships. So as my students were using Blockify, which you saw a few slides back, they ran into some frustrations as well as some things that they loved. And so we started just tweeting with Blockify what we were making, what we were loving, and they started tweeting back with us. And so we started tweeting so much that we decided to make a Google Doc, and we shared it with them. So every time we came up with something we loved, we added it to the doc, and every time we came up with an idea to make it better, we added that. And we would see them come onto the doc, and so the kids would know, oh, they're looking at what we're saying, and it was great. And then an update would come out, and we would load it, and they would see something that they said as an improvement. And I'm sure, they probably heard that same piece of feedback from hundreds of other people, but the kids felt like it was their idea, and maybe it was, but it was just so empowering for them to see something I said was changed to a tool that's used by people around the world. Lots of companies want you to beta test for them, and people are, beta testing is messy. If any of you have done it, it's messy. And you just have to, when you jump into it, you have to know that there's going to be, that's what it is, it's beta. So there's going to be problems, things are not going to work. But I have done several beta tests with students, and to me it's so rich with opportunities to talk about failure and how rough drafts, and how when something isn't working, you get feedback, you make it better, you try again, you don't give up. And so our kids beta test things like Wondu Planet. When Wondu Planet first came out from Evanced, we were testing it before it was available to the public. We were having weekly meetings with Lindsay Hill at Evanced, giving her feedback, and then she was taking that to developers. They were making changes. We would try the changes, and we would just do this over and over. And now Wondu Planet's used by people all over. Then we signed up whole grade levels, and whole grade levels were giving feedback. But I just love this idea of kids working together with the people that create these tools. This is the creator of RubeWorks, which is a Rube Goldberg game. We've given him lots of feedback on his. And one of my favorites was when we connected with Chromeville. Chromeville's an augmented reality app where you color these sheets, and then you scan the page with your device, and they come to life, and the characters walk around. And kindergarten used this to write narrative stories. So they colored the page, they scanned it, they watched the character walking around, and then they developed this whole storyline about the character. But what happened along the way was that if they colored it a certain way, the page wouldn't scan. And it was kindergarten. And so they cried. And it was not fun. But it was a great learning opportunity for them, even though it was sad. Because I said, you know what? This happens. Tools don't always work. I said, after they dried their tears, I said, we're going to let Chromeville know what happened. And so we took pictures of the pages that didn't work. We sent them to Chromeville. We talked to, and so they started having conversations back with us. Well, why is this not working? Is it because of the markers that you used? Did you color outside the line? There were lots of back and forth things, and so we helped them fine tune, getting it to work better. But we also helped them construct better instructions for how to use it, because we found there were better tools to use to color with, and certain colors worked better than others, and there were just lots of things that we discovered. And so we Skyped with them, and they're in Spain, so it was really interesting with language and accents, trying to understand Georgia accents in Spain. But it was great fun, and so the kids were able to read their stories that were based on the Chromeville characters to the developers and give them that feedback. But one of the developers that we Skype with the most is Flipgrid. Flipgrid's a tool that I use all the time, and I can tell you more about it later. But every time we do a project with Flipgrid, at the end of that project, we Skype with them, and they talk to the kids about how many people have viewed their work, how many likes they've gotten, some data about where people have viewed their work from, and they really give them this encouragement to see that they have a global voice. By recording themselves and sharing that with the world, they are impacting people all around the world. And the Flipgrid team has shared our Black History project that we do. They've shared it at conferences all over the world as they've been presenting. So every time they share this thing that we've done, those students' voices are reaching even more people. You know, there was a time where kids got up and they presented their work to the class and the teacher, and that still happens today. But it's really not enough anymore. Kids need a larger audience than just the teacher and the classroom. At this conference, you've heard a lot about makerspaces. You have the Maker Lounge. It's the theme of the conference is making and creating and doing, sharing. So we do have a makerspace in our library, and from what you heard yesterday from the student who spoke, it is an empowering place. It's a place where students who haven't found a connection in the school find a connection. It's a place where kids who haven't talked to each other since they were in kindergarten and they're now in 5th grade suddenly are working together and sharing their knowledge. It's a place to talk about failure. And so when I started the Makerspace, there was much more student demand than there was teachers banging down the door to come in and use it with their students. The kids knew there was a 3D printer, they knew there was robotics, and they were constantly asking me, how do I come and use the Makerspace? And so I was frantically trying to find ways to collaborate with teachers, and I just realized I can't keep up. I can't keep up with the student demand by doing projects with teachers. And so I had to do something different. So I started collaborating with that same UGA professor or teacher, Gretchen Thomas, and started asking her, is there a way that we could have your students here more often so that we could have an open makerspace? I'm by myself in the library. I don't have an assistant, so I'm doing lots of teaching. It's hard for me to have an open makerspace and do all of the teaching that I do too. So I really needed the help. And so with her, we worked up this plan to have independent study graduate students come in so that there was someone there every day from 11 to 12:15, and it was an open sign-up. So we created sign-up sheets. Each day had a different purpose, like Monday might be Little Bits and Sphero, and Tuesday might be 3D design, and students signed up. The UGA students didn't have any expertise in these areas. They were really just a person that was there to sort of manage the space and learn along with the kids. So they were learning right as the kids were learning about the tools. They also came in and did kind of informal maker fairs with lots of different kinds of making just to get kids' feet wet in different things that they might consider. But I still had that teacher thing in my head. How do I get teachers using the Makerspace even more? Because I knew the more I got teachers using it, the more that it would empower students to get to use it in the curriculum that they were doing. So I do teacher Makerspaces where teachers come in and use the space and learn about the tools and think about the standards that they're working on and how the space fits in with what they're doing. Trying my best to figure out how to fit it in to the curriculum. But one of the projects that came out of all this was 3rd grade studies rocks and minerals. So we Skyped with a local jewelry studio that designs their own jewelry from 3D modeling what it's going to look like to the final product. And then the kids designed their own. They're a little larger than you would have in a ring. But they sort of took that idea of cutting a gem to set in a piece of jewelry, and they designed that and 3D printed those. We used Little Bits in 4th grade to do star charts to project onto the wall. Our art teacher did kinetic sculptures with our 3rd graders. You already heard about those kindergartners doing Blockify, and they created sculptures that they wrote about going inside. Our 4th grade created these stamps that represented themselves as part of a Native American study, and they made this huge dream catcher where they stamped into a clay pot that hung from this grade level dream catcher. Pre-K used Sphero to practice their writing. And then we decided to take our show on the road. We did a walking field trip to UGA to the Student Center, and I took a big group of 2nd through 5th graders. And I said, we're going to go with this, Gretchen, I said, we're going to go to UGA and we're going to teach some college students about what makerspaces are and how to use robotics. And so we walked down, we set up tables, and all of the college students had their headphones in, and they were walking, straight. So my kids quickly realized they're not going to stop. And so they started coming up with really creative ideas for how to get the college kids to stop and try out Makerspace. So some of them leaped out in front of people. Some of them we really learned a lot about their personality. There was this one student, I've got a video on my blog of, Malachi. He sort of took on this kind of sideshow kind of character and had on a hat and glasses and leaped out and said, "How about you, fine lady? Would you like to come up?" So it was really interesting to see kids kind of thrown into this situation that was so unlike what they do every day, and how they found their voice in getting these kids to stop. But when they did, it was so fun to watch the college students listening to these 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th graders talk about their work. But at that same time, the kids were just as much teachers as learners, too. So they were teaching, but there was also lots of stuff there that they weren't as familiar with. So what I love about a makerspace is that it allows kids to be teachers and learners just very fluidly. They're just kind of bouncing back and forth from both while they're there. We do lots of tinkering, not just in the makerspace. I think it's one of the things that I've come to value so much this year is that when I plan a project with teachers, I say we have to give our kids time to tinker. We can't throw them in and say, here's the rubric, here's what your product's got to look like at the end, let's get to work. They need time to play. They need, even if it's 30 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I said we have to build this time in this year, and it's made such a difference to give them this time to play, because it really gives them permission to trust themselves, that they are experts. They have knowledge. They can figure this out themselves. And again, in the end, it ends up saving us time, I think. We had kids who tinkered with educations, and then they made all kinds of things like math tutorial videos. We had kindergartners who made ebooks through an app called StoryKit. But again, there were so many tools within StoryKit. And the kids, the first thing I said to them was, today I'm giving you permission to press every button you see what it does. There's no purpose in what you have to create. You can create anything you want to, just press every button and figure out what it does. And so then kids would come up afterward and they would teach each other what they discovered. So we would project an iPad up onto the wall and they would show what they had figured out. And so different strategies would come up that I never would have thought of as the teacher that they would share. And it would be life-changing for the rest of the class as far as time. There was one 2nd grader who came up with this brilliant idea in EduCreations of how, because they were creating these videos that were like 10 minutes long that should have been a minute. And it was because they were taking so long to draw everything. And so he came up with this brilliant way of saving time and then taught it to everybody. One of my favorite things is individual students, seeing individual students shine. There was this one student who was really frustrated with writing, and he was just kind of that student that just sat there and said, I don't know what to write about. And so what I did with him instead, we were writing poetry, and he just was not having it. I sat down and said, let's just talk to me about what's important, what's on your mind. And so at that time, he had just moved to our school from New Orleans, and he was a survivor of Hurricane Katrina. And so he talked about Hurricane Katrina. He was at the Superdome through the hurricane, and so he described it. And so I started writing out all of these notes, and he took that and wrote this amazing poem based on his experience. And it just was magic because that same year, Chandra Strickland had an art exhibit that was touring, and they asked us to display it at our school, and she is the illustrator of a book called A Place Where Hurricanes Happen, which is about Hurricane Katrina. And so her artwork was all around our library, and I went and got David, and I said, do I have your permission to put your poem beside the pictures of Hurricane Katrina? And he, of course, said yes. And then when Chandra came, she met him and talked to him about his poem and how amazing it was, and how great it paired with her artwork. And then he went on to write a speech for the Foundation for Excellence dinner, which is a local foundation that we have, that he gave, and he wrote all himself. So I was very proud of him. But I love when students come and they're so passionate about an idea, and then I think, oh my gosh, where does that fit in their day? Where does that fit in their curriculum? Cooper came to me at the very beginning of this year and said, I've got this great idea. I want to build my own Skylanders, and I want to 3D design them and print them. And, oh, okay. And I didn't say anything to him negative. I said, all right, let's see if we can figure out how to do that. And so he ended up coming and meeting with me, and we talked about how to use Tinkercad. And he went home and did everything at home. He designed his own figures. We 3D printed them. They fell apart. And then he went back and redesigned them. Taylor was a second grade student who became really passionate about 3D printing. And when we were doing the Barrow Peace Prize project, he decided he was going to make the Barrow Peace Prize medal that we could hand out. To me, sharing student work on social media and the blog really gives them so many opportunities. This is a kindergartner who wrote an ebook on his own with me in the library, and we put it on the blog, and it ended up becoming homework for a college class in, I don't remember where it was, Illinois, I think. So it was amazing that a student's work became this homework assignment, and that person in college cared enough to talk back to the student and give him some feedback. So I'll quickly go through these last few slides. I love connecting kids with a global audience, and there are just so many opportunities out there to find places to connect with people, from Talk Like a Pirate to International Day to Hour of Code, where we were able to let kids talk to students in other states about what they were coding and give each other feedback. World Read Aloud Day is a great time to sign up and just give it a try. But what I love about these global projects is that kids can really create something that makes a difference in the world. It's not just some standard project that they're doing for school, but that it actually can create change. Recently we did, this past year, we did a project with, and I'll have to talk about some of these in my session later today. I want to show this last project. A couple of projects that we did where we were really serving the community. Several schools banded together and created rainbow loom bracelets that were sent to a school in India. We also did some 3D charms that we attached to those. We Skyped with Joyce Sidman and wrote really short poems that we attached to each bracelet. And we crowdsourced all of that through a Google form, so schools all around the world could contribute these poems that we put on the bracelets and mailed to India. We also did a project around America Recycles Day, where students were really thinking about what are the recycling problems that we have in our schools and how can we work together to solve those. So I would exchange my problem with a school in another state, and they would give us their problem, and we would brainstorm for each other what we could do. So in my library, I've kind of embraced this motto of expecting the miraculous, which comes from this book, Flora and Ulysses. And it's become the title of the blog now, but it really, for me, it means that no matter what project we start with students, that even if you feel like things are failing, you're not achieving the goals that you maybe set out to do, there are still miraculous things happening there. You just have to look and listen and see what amazing things your students are doing. So I invite you to continue thinking today as you do the rest of the conference how you can empower student voice in your district and school. Thank you.